The reason we had Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole. Did the dwarfs make it or no?
Well, the CGI dwarfs did. Of course, that goes back to the original controversy.
Well, I know this point has been made, but this truly is the worst casting maybe in the history of the film industry. Has there been a film with worse casting than this? And I don't just mean the Snow White actress. Obviously, she's terrible, but both of them.
Was Disney's latest Snow White remake destined to be a poisoned apple from the start? Forget Happily Ever After. This fairy tale ended with a box office bomb and a PR disaster of epic proportions. Millions lost, reputations tarnished, and a studio left reeling. But was this just bad luck, or was the writing on the magic mirror all along? Let's dive into the chaotic story behind Disney's Snow White flop and unpack just how spectacularly things went wrong.
Disney is having its own problems. They're finally releasing the latest adaptation of Snow White, but they're scaling back the Hollywood premiere of the film. Kinsey, why is that?
Because Rachel Zegler is a PR.
When Rachel Zegler's casting as Snow White was initially announced, a fragile optimism flickered amongst some corners of the internet. Here was a young, visibly talented actress fresh off a well-received performance in West Side Story, possessing undeniable vocal prowess, seemingly ticking boxes for a modern Disney princess. Perhaps, some cautiously hoped, this remake could actually defy the growing cynicism surrounding live-action adaptations and offer something fresh and engaging. However, this initial positive sentiment proved remarkably short-lived. Almost immediately, a countercurrent of skepticism began to swell. Online forums buzzed with questions, fan communities voiced concerns, and early critiques started to surface, questioning the very essence of this casting choice. Looking back now, with the benefit of hindsight, it's chillingly clear that these early murmurs were not just isolated negativity, but rather the first tremors of a full-blown earthquake. The fairy tale facade was already showing cracks, the magic was fading, and trouble, as they say, was undeniably brewing from the very start.
I think it's fair to say that no one can stand the star of this movie.
One of the reasons why Rachel Zegler sticks around is she's got a beautiful voice and she has some talent. So I think that certainly helps her because she's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her.
Then came the now infamous comments. Oh, but these weren't just minor missteps, these were verbal grenades launched directly into the heart of Disney's beloved legacy. In interview after interview, with a candor that bordered on self-sabotage, Rachel Zegler appeared determined to dismantle the very foundation of the cherished story she was tasked with revitalizing. The iconic 1937 animated classic, a cornerstone of Disney's empire, dismissed as weird, outdated, and fundamentally irrelevant to a contemporary audience. She painted it as an ancient relic, a dusty artifact that had no place in the sleek modern world she envisioned for her Snow White. Imagine walking into a boardroom and telling the CEO that their company's most iconic and profitable product line is tacky and out of touch, mere weeks before a major relaunch. Yeah, the reaction from Disney's core fan base went about as smoothly as you might expect, which is to say, it detonated. The internet, as they say, went nuclear. Disney diehards, generations who had grown up on the enchanting charm of the original Snow White, felt not just mildly offended, but deeply betrayed, personally insulted, and utterly alienated. It felt less like a respectful reimagining and more like a deliberate act of cultural vandalism, as if someone was not just critiquing, but actively trashing their collective childhood memories right to their faces. Suddenly, this remake wasn't a celebration of a classic, it morphed into something akin to a hostile takeover.
Given all the behind-the-scenes mayhem, I expected a Frankenstein's monster were seen to be stitched together. I think a lot of these live action updates are really hard to watch. They've really done so much stepping on rakes over the last few months with this project where the box office is just not going to recover.
Man. Hello, Disney. You're going to have to redo your film again because this woman is a pig and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense.
Disney, jolted awake by the deafening roar of online outrage, swiftly recognized they were facing not just a minor PR hiccup, but a full-blown raging firestorm threatening to engulf their entire project. Panic mode engaged. The carefully constructed PR machine, usually so adept at spinning narratives and controlling the message, scrambled for any semblance of damage control. Cue the dramatic, almost theatrical pivot. Zegler, seemingly in the blink of an eye, underwent a remarkable transformation, morphing from a vocal critic into a fervent, almost evangelical champion of the original Snow White narrative. Tearful interviews began to surface, strategically placed across various media outlets, filled with declarations of newfound, profound love for Snow White and solemn promises to honor its sacred legacy. Disney PR spun into overdrive, attempting to repackage Zegler's narrative, burying the controversial comments under a sudden avalanche of manufactured positivity. But the digital age has a long memory, and the internet rarely forgets. The damage, as they say, was already irrevocably done. This sudden, almost comical, backpedaling felt, well, let's just say profoundly less than genuine to a discerning public. It was akin to witnessing a clumsy magician desperately attempting to shove a fully grown squawking rabbit back into a hat that had not only exploded but was actively on fire. The more frantically they attempted to fix the situation, the more transparently awkward and ultimately counterproductive their efforts became. Initial skepticism among fans rapidly hardened into deep-seated cynicism, and for a vast swath of the audience, the movie itself was already irrevocably tainted, poisoned by the very words of its leading star.
Every time she opens her mouth, it's crisis mode when it comes to Disney, having to backtrack. She talks about how this isn't a fairy tale about falling in love with the prince. This is a fairy tale about fighting your own battle.
But the Snow White saga, as messy and self-inflicted as it was, turned out to be far from an isolated incident. Dig a little deeper beneath the shimmering surface of Rachel Zegler's public persona, and a disconcerting pattern began to emerge, hinting at a potentially deeper issue. Remember West Side Story, the Steven Spielberg-directed, critically acclaimed musical that was, in theory, supposed to catapult Zegler into the Hollywood stratosphere and solidify her as a major star? Even that seemingly golden opportunity wasn't spared from her critiques. Reports and even direct quotes surfaced of her seemingly downplaying the significance of the role, almost casually dismissing the experience. It sounded less like a dream fulfilled, a career-defining moment, and more like, well, just another job, another stepping stone, perhaps even a somewhat underwhelming experience. This wasn't merely about the Snow White PR disaster anymore. It hinted at a more fundamental disconnect, a potential chasm between the actress's public pronouncements and the very projects that were designed and indeed succeeded in elevating her platform and profile. Whispers began to circulate within Hollywood circles, hushed conversations questioning the long-term viability of casting someone who seemed at best ambivalent and at worst openly critical of the very industry that was embracing her. The question on many studio executives' minds became less about talent and more about temperament. Could Rachel Zegler truly be considered a reliable, brand-safe star in an industry increasingly sensitive to public perception and online sentiment?
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
Oh my God.
And I can only hope
What does that mean?
that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
Then the moment of undeniable truth arrived, cold and stark as a winter's morning, the theatrical release of Snow White. The film finally, somewhat meekly, limped into theaters, and the critical and audience reception was, well, unequivocally brutal. Professional critics, largely unimpressed, delivered scathing reviews citing everything from lackluster CGI to a muddled narrative and a pervasive tonal inconsistency. But even more damning than the critical drubbing was the audience response, a collective shrug. Moviegoers, already primed by months of negative press and online controversy, simply stayed away in droves. And the box office numbers, they weren't just disappointing, they were, in a word, disastrous. We're talking catastrophic levels of financial underperformance, a spectacular implosion that sent shockwaves throughout the industry. Millions upon millions of Disney dollars marketing budgets, production costs, projected profits vanished faster than the evil queen dissolving in a puff of smoke. The financial failure wasn't just a minor setback, it was a stark, undeniable, and publicly humiliating confirmation of everything the online backlash had so accurately predicted months prior. It wasn't merely that a segment of the audience disliked the movie, a vast majority actively avoided it, consciously choosing to spend their entertainment dollars elsewhere. The pre-release controversy had, in essence, become the movie's defining characteristic, a toxic cloud hanging over the project, ultimately driving potential viewers away in droves and transforming a would-be blockbuster into a certified multi-million-dollar bomb.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Now, in the cold light of box office reality, the once magical kingdom of Disney finds itself in a state of palpable crisis. Rumors are swirling around the mouse house like poisoned apples in a fairy tale forest, persistent whispers of impending layoffs across various departments, potential executive shakeups at the highest levels, and entire future remake strategies being quietly and perhaps permanently shelved. The financial fallout from the Snow White debacle is very real, very significant, and the long-term consequences are still unfolding, casting a long shadow over Disney's future endeavors. And what about Rachel Zegler, the actress at the epicenter of this storm? Her carefully cultivated image, her once bright trajectory within the Disney universe, and indeed perhaps her broader prospects within Hollywood as a whole now hang precariously in the balance. This wasn't simply a movie that underperformed, it was a cautionary tale writ large, etched in stark box office receipts and amplified by the relentless echo chamber of social media outrage. The industry is watching, taking notes, and pondering the lessons learned from this very public and very costly miscalculation.
It's just a total nightmare for the studios. So now she's trying to sell like, oh, I love Snow White. I love everything about the whole story. Here she is more recently trying to change the messaging. This is actually Wednesday.
While the casting of Snow White herself dominated the headlines, another simmering controversy brewed beneath the surface, one that arguably spoke to deeper issues of representation and authenticity in Hollywood, the portrayal of the Seven Dwarfs. From the outset, the film faced criticism for its reimagining of these iconic characters, opting for a diverse group of magical creatures rendered in CGI rather than casting actors with dwarfism. This decision, initially framed as a progressive move away from potentially stereotypical depictions, ironically sparked backlash from the very community it was ostensibly trying to be sensitive towards. Peter Dinklage, a prominent actor with dwarfism, publicly criticized Disney's approach, arguing that while well-intentioned, it ultimately erased opportunities for actors with dwarfism to be cast in meaningful roles. His critique resonated deeply, igniting a debate about performative allyship versus genuine inclusivity. Many within the dwarfism community echoed Dinklage's concerns, pointing out the irony of Disney patting itself on the back for avoiding stereotypes, while simultaneously sidestepping the chance to provide actual paid work to actors who embody these identities. This wasn't just about political correctness gone awry, it was about a missed opportunity to genuinely enrich the film and promote authentic representation on screen, inadvertently fueling accusations of tokenism and further marginalizing a community already underrepresented in mainstream media. The magical creatures became another point of contention, adding another layer of complexity and negativity to the already troubled production.
And now she's trying to reinvent herself because there's been so much blowback. And you can only imagine the studio calls about this woman behind the scene. Like, oh my God, we're $242 million in and our lead actress hates our film, our actors, our storyline.
While Rachel Zegler bore the brunt of the pre-release controversy, the casting of Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen also raised eyebrows, albeit for different reasons. Gadot, known for her striking beauty and commanding screen presence, seemed on the surface like a perfect fit for the role of a powerful, regal villain. However, a key element of the Evil Queen's character in the original fairy tale is her consuming envy of Snow White's beauty, the driving force behind her villainy. This is where the casting choice began to falter in the eyes of some viewers. Could audiences truly suspend their disbelief enough to accept that Gal Gadot, a woman widely regarded as one of the most beautiful actresses in Hollywood, would be genuinely envious of Rachel Zegler's Snow White in a way that justified murderous intent? For many, the answer was a resounding no. The imbalance in perceived beauty in this context felt jarring even within the fantastical realm of a fairy tale. It strained credulity and weakened the central conflict of the story. While Godot's performance may have been technically proficient, the fundamental casting premise itself felt misjudged, undermining the narrative's core motivation and contributing to the overall sense of disconnect and inauthenticity that plagued the film from multiple angles. This casting choice, while seemingly glamorous on paper, inadvertently exposed a deeper flaw in the film's conceptualization, highlighting a lack of attention to the nuanced character dynamics that made the original story so enduring.
That audiences walk away from this film with an understanding of the true meaning of fairness, of what it means to be fair in this world. There is a message that's been carried on for almost 90 years now from the original animated classic. That is, fairness is what is within. Fairness is to do with your heart, the way you treat the people around you, and it has nothing to do with what you look like, and that's the misunderstanding between Snow White and the Evil Queen. I think it's such an important message, and the way that Disney has elevated it and brought it to this new audience is very special.
The Snow White saga serves as a stark and undeniably expensive lesson for Hollywood, particularly in an era saturated with remakes and adaptations. It underscores the critical importance of respecting the source material, understanding the nuances of beloved narratives, and perhaps most crucially, truly listening to the evolving voice of the audience. In an age of instant online feedback and hyper-engaged fan communities, studios can no longer afford to operate in a vacuum, dictating creative choices without considering the potential for widespread public reaction. The Snow White debacle highlights the dangers of prioritizing modernization and relevance at the expense of the core elements that made the original story resonate for generations. It's a potent reminder that audiences are not simply passive consumers. They are active participants in the cultural conversation, wielding considerable power to shape a film's destiny, both before and after its release. For actors and public figures, the cautionary tale is equally clear. In an age of constant scrutiny and viral social media cycles, authenticity, self-awareness, and a degree of humility are no longer optional extras. They are essential survival tools. Off-the-cuff remarks, perceived arrogance, and a disconnect from the audience can have swift and devastating consequences, potentially derailing careers and sinking multi-million-dollar projects. Snow White's failure isn't just a box office statistic, it's a cultural inflection point. A loud and clear signal that Hollywood needs to recalibrate its approach to remakes, reimagine its relationship with its audience, and learn to navigate the complex and ever-shifting landscape of public opinion in the digital age.
But you're going to hire little people to play the dwarfs? That just seems like a step backwards. And then, of course, Disney instantly buckled and said, okay, we're going to add magical creatures. And then the picture of the magical creatures leaked online, and everyone just had an absolute blast laughing at it. So the magical creatures are here in the movie. The CGI dwarfs are here in the movie. It works to a degree, but it's certainly going to be a financial hit for Disney, that's for sure.
So, as the dust begins to settle on this modern, spectacularly messed up fairy tale, what are the enduring lessons we can glean from the ashes of Snow White? Perhaps the most glaring takeaway is that in today's hyper-connected, socially driven world, brazenly disrespecting beloved source material and crucially alienating your core devoted audience is no longer a viable marketing strategy. It's a near-guaranteed recipe for catastrophic disaster, even for a seemingly invincible entertainment behemoth like Disney. Perhaps it's a stark reminder of the enduring power of authenticity in an age of manufactured narratives. Forced apologies and transparent attempts at damage control rarely, if ever, genuinely fool a savvy public. Or maybe, just maybe, the most profound lesson of all is for Hollywood itself. A crucial, humbling reminder about the ultimate power of the fans, the consumers, the very people who hold the keys to box office success, and the very real perils of consistently underestimating or worse, outright ignoring them. One thing, however, remains unequivocally clear. This particular Snow White story is a far, far cry from any semblance of happily ever after. It serves as a stark, real-world reminder that in the dazzling, often treacherous kingdom of showbiz, sometimes the most potent magic trick of all is simply possessing the self-awareness to avoid, at all costs, stepping directly onto your own exquisitely crafted, but ultimately fragile glass slipper.